All right, it looks like we're ready to go, so let's get started. Good morning, good afternoon to everyone. Welcome to today's webinar, Democratizing Network Automation Through Low Code. A quick introduction, I'm Rich Martin, Senior Technical Marketing Engineer at Itential. And we also have joined us today, Karan Manalingal, Senior Solutions Architect with Itential, who will be walking you through some Itential demos a little bit later. Before we get started, here are a few housekeeping points. Number one, everyone on the call will be muted. We also reserve answering any questions until the end of the presentation, but please ask any questions along the way by typing them into the questions panel, which can be found at the bottom of your control panel. And if we can't get to all the questions on this call, we will answer your questions via email shortly after the webinar. So with that, let's get started. So today's reality is this. From a network automation perspective, network operations has been siloed, and this hits very, very close to home for me. I can relate to it, having been for a large part of my career on the networking side, having built, troubleshot, architected networks for many years. Automation has always been difficult, and it's not completely the fault of the network engineer. We just haven't had the tools. We haven't had the right systems in place to be able to do the things that we really wanted to do. And over time, we've seen a lot of external pressures and a lot of internal pressures to get networking up to speed. But what we're seeing now is that it's really lagging behind. And even when network engineers can get the skills to start to maybe automate some of the routine network tasks that they have, they're still not able to participate fully in some of the digital transformation initiatives that are going on in organizations. And we see conflict and even some duplication of tasks. On top of that, there's still a lot of pressure going on for the networking teams, and because of the fact that networking is actually getting more complex. It is not just a CLI-driven world out there. Look in terms of SD-WAN. There are directors, controllers, orchestrators. In terms of cloud and what it's done with changing the landscape of IT. There's a whole new methodology of how you deliver applications and networking that go along with that. For data centers, what used to be just a multi-tiered architecture with routers and switches and just basic IP routing with OSPF and BGP is now even more complicated. We have leaf-spine architectures, underlays, overlays, and your underlay may be controlled by one application and your overlay controlled by another one. These are all under the domain of the networking teams. So they are having a hard time keeping up with what they did have and what the new skills that they need to have. And so this brings us to our next point. That CLI skill set and all the experience that they bring to the table still has to be done. There's still a large majority of networking devices and parts of the network that are still managed by the way we've always done it. On top of that, they're having to develop the skill sets to adapt to these new ways of deploying and building and managing and maintaining networks. As we push forward into the journey of network automation, retraining network engineers as software developers is unrealistic. Think about the colleagues and the friends that I still speak to today who are in those roles and how overwhelmed they are with everything they have to keep up with. And then to say, hey, can you pick up some Python? Hey, can you learn to be a developer? They don't have the time. Now, many of them have picked up these skills and started to do some basic CLI scripting or some basic Python scripting, and that's great. But to bring a new platform or a new solution and ask people to rip and replace is costly and time intensive, especially if there's already been quite a bit of work built around automating the network or around the network. That rip and replace just isn't on the table. Which brings us to why democratizing network automation is so critical as we move into the future. Number one, we have to enable more participation in network automation. I think about just the amount of teams that are involved in networking in some way. Sometimes they're segmented as the organization or the network grows, but you have data center folks, you have campus folks. Maybe the campus folks are managing the switched infrastructure, but also the wireless infrastructure, and they have their own means and methods of managing that. Think in terms of SD-WAN, cloud, data center, underlay, overlay. All of these things are going on, and we have to have all of these pieces and parts of these groups participating in network automation. And even outside of the realm of network automation and networking in general, we need to have more groups participating. So we believe that participation is good, and we need more participation around that. If we can get the networking teams to participate in network automation, we help to remove that helps to remove the silos that we've naturally developed over time due for a variety of reasons. And ultimately, what people are seeing now that are in the midst of automation is that we can automate all these pieces and parts, but when we finally get down to the networking side, well, we can't do much to automate that, and it becomes the bottleneck. It doesn't have to be that way, and it shouldn't be that way. But again, legacy has the way it's unfolded in history is that's the way it is, and so we have to mitigate and remove that network bottleneck. It's important that we realize that we need to bring the right skills for the right task. And right now, those skills lie in a multitude of people in your organization. So specific to networking, think about all the expertise and the skills in designing, developing, managing, troubleshooting the network that they've gained for years now. Those skills are valuable and important, but at the same time, how do we leverage that into some sort of workflow or automation if those people aren't trained to do any kind of software development? So there's another skill that resides in another group, and what we need to do is, again, bring them all to the table to participate and interact with one another to bring those skills for the right tasks. Ultimately, the net result will be a reduction in cost, and a decrease in the time to value. I think in terms of time, especially as a networking person, um, how many software upgrades can I do in a night? If I can automate that task, can I cram more in, right? Because that's never ending, especially in um, context of security and CVEs and the need to constantly upgrade and update your networking elements to keep up with any kind of security problems that might be going on at the time. But if we can also not just automate those simple tasks, but then bring those tasks and leverage those as greater automations from start to finish, from the beginning of a service ticket being opened to the automation being completed, the task completed, checked, and then the service ticket closed. That brings a tremendous value to not just the networking team, but the entire organization. And that's ultimately where we're headed with this. And democratization will help to build all of that and bridge all of those gaps. So one of the things that's very interesting is when we look at the skill sets that are going to be needed in the immediate future. I mean, it's not just looking 5 years down the road. We're seeing this happen now. But according to Gartner, we can gain some pretty interesting insights into the skills that are going to be required for network operations and management going into the future. So it's not a CLI-driven world anymore. Really, we're seeing the overlap in the interaction between lots of different technologies because the network is everywhere, it connects everything. And so your network team is going to have to be not just conversationally aware of what's going on, but technically aware of these other systems and tools and technologies. Just looking at this very quickly, this Gartner information, cloud architecture is going to be a big one. And I think this makes a lot of sense, because if we actually look at um, a network, your typical networking engineer, operations person, architect, if you ask them what a VLAN is, they could tell you everything about what a VLAN is. This is what they've been working with and living in day to day for years now. They can tell you how to configure it, how it works, what its limitations are, because it is a networking construct. However, if you say, hey, can you tell me how a VPC works? Well, that seems to be outside of their realm, because it lives in the cloud world, right? It lives in a cloud construct. However, the VPC itself has elements of networking all about it. So why isn't the networking team able to understand and then configure that? Not only that, how do you configure a VPC in the cloud? It's completely different from a CLI driven world. And so those kind of skill sets, because now applications built in the cloud may need to have connectivity back into some other part of the network. And these two domains need to come together to understand how each technology works and where the interaction lies. So that's a great example of that. But we're also seeing the need for DevOps engineering skills, programming, and this one's a couple of interesting ones, AI and machine learning. All of these are going to be identified skills required going into the future. And again, this ties back to the fact that if we look at our networks today and the network technologies we're deploying today, we're seeing less and less CLI. So for a network engineer, a network focused person who perhaps has been rooted in the CLI world for so long, think about how they're deploying SD-WAN. Zero touch provisioning through a director, orchestrator, controller, very little CLI, actually on the front end, no CLI. And I've seen on the back end, their CLI may exist, but really for the direst circumstances in troubleshooting. Again, the CLI is starting to disappear, and a lot of people are unaware of that. It's just, we're starting to understand that with the right tools and systems, we can not only provision and bring up networking devices and elements, but we can manage and maintain them through non-CLI interfaces. The cloud has really brought us to the realization that applications drive networking demands. The thinking years ago that network is a resource was probably not proven to be successful until the cloud, because if I can spin up an application and underlying the application is a server with hardware resources, with storage, with an operating system, with the libraries I need, and along with all of that, all of the networking that it needs to get online and be reachable, it made people aware that applications can treat the network as a resource. The question is, how do we bring that out of a cloud context and into the rest of networking? And now that we're developing the orchestrators, the controllers with APIs, this can be done. The other really big thing happening right now is DevOps tools for networking. We're seeing an explosion of folks using Ansible and Terraform to do initial configurations, day 0 to day n configurations, and then different processes and procedures during the maintenance and life cycle of these networks and network elements. This is continuing and will continue in the future. So that's all good, because that means people are adopting automation for the network. So what is needed to democratize network automation? Now, if we think about it, again, we've talked about the fact that we cannot immediately bring new skill sets to folks, especially network engineers, making them into programmers. But we see the need for these skill sets in the immediate future. So there has to be an easy on-ramp for the non-developer. We want to invite, again, as many people to the automation table as possible. That could be people in IT and security, and specifically in networks and network operations, to help streamline these processes. If we could give them a way to take a lot of that embedded tribal knowledge that is so valuable and find a way to encapsulate it, transfer it, encapsulate it into an automation and a workflow without a whole bunch of programming in a very low code environment, that would give us a great on-ramp to network automation. And so along with that, I like to think about the fact that we see a lot of real expertise on the networking side with our networking teams. I mean, they can troubleshoot things in their minds. They can troubleshoot things subconsciously sometimes just by asking, can you ping this or can you ping that? And that's fantastic, but it doesn't scale. And that knowledge is valuable, and it's been stored up for so many years. I find it interesting that when I talk to customers, a lot of times, that knowledge has never been transferred into anything, even documentation. Actually, I find one of two things true. Number one, there's no documentation for a particular network procedure or network troubleshooting, or there is documentation and it's got so many details for every contingency and corner case that person has ever run into that's even hard to follow. Now, what we want to do is we want to take that right? We want to bring that into a network automation platform so that it can be used, tested, used, and then reused across the organization. And that includes not just the knowledge, but let's say if that networking person or that team has invested in their own set of scripts to do things like software upgrades or configuration changes, bringing ports up and down. We want to be able to use that. That needs to be part of the platforms that's going to solve these problems. Ultimately, we want to integrate DevOps principles. These are well-known, solid principles that have been applied to other network or to other domains outside of networking, but also need to be applied to the domain of networking to be part of the whole process and journey of automation. And then we also need to enable cloud architect participation. The VPCs and the VLANs discussion from the last slide is a perfect example of that. This is where the two worlds collide. We need to have networking people that can understand the networking constructs of the cloud, and we need to have the cloud teams understand how that integrates and operates within the network. So that brings us to the Itential automation platform. We are intelligent automation for multi-domain networks. And so our principles are we want to be API first. We want to consolidate and extend the capabilities of individual network management tools into a single network API. So if you think about all the controllers and orchestrators that exist today and the ones that will exist in the future, um, we want to integrate that into our platform. If those are the tools that these teams are bringing to the table, then the API that they present to us is what we want to bring into our platform. We also want to bring into our platform IT systems, ITSM, CRM, operation systems, order management. They are all part of the overall automation process. And so they have APIs, and we bring those easily into our network or into our platform as well. We want to abstract and federate this information. So we want to bring the process, the knowledge, and the data from these systems and present them for use in automation tasks. Since we are network focused and we want to consume and federate the specific network modeling language that already exists, because there's a large amount of work that's been put forward into network automation. So Yang, YAML, Tosca languages, and then bring that data and abstract it so that it can start to be used in a very low code way. And so we can present a drag and drop interface, a blank canvas that non-programmers can interact with and start putting down and building repeatable automation and workflows that can be part of work that they do and then integrated into a larger workflow and process. So these features are what Itential brings. We are the automation platform that enables everyone from your organization. And so we want to start with network engineers, software developers, IT. From a network management perspective, the networking centered focus folks in your organization that really need that easy on-ramp, we have a feature called Automation Gateway. So we can leverage the scripts that they've built, and instead of asking them to throw those out and rewrite those or re-architect those, we can take those scripts that have no API, build an API on top of it, and then they become tasks that can now be run and used inside of our platform. We'll see in a moment, Automation Studio. This is the blank canvas, the low-code on-ramps that non-programming individuals in your organizations, especially the networking folks, can start to work and bring that embedded knowledge that they have and that valuable experience into an automation and a workflow that can be used by them and by other organizations. We also have an application called Configuration Manager. Configuration Manager manages golden configs, 0 to day end configurations and remediation built on top of our platform. So it's an application that's built there, as well as Service Manager, which handles network lifecycle management, also built on our platform. At the same time, we want to make sure that the other parties that come to the table that are part of the automation journey have the tools that they need, so they can bring their own tools, their own systems, right? So we integrate with APIs, but for the developers, we want to make sure that they are aware that we have open source adapters. Adapters are our interfaces into these different systems. We have the ability for them to generate their own adapters. So we have a library of adapters. If an adapter that they're using, because every ecosystem for different organizations are different. You're going to have different pieces and parts of systems that you're using for ITSM, for IPAM, for networking, for SD-WAN, all of those things. You don't have to wait for us to build an adapter. If there's a Swagger API spec available, you can build an adapter and immediately start using it. And then we have a bunch of pre-built automations, which is great for the networking folks to get started, but it's also awesome for the developer. The developer can now take that pre-built automation, see how it functions and works, and then extend it or create something from it. So it's kind of like sample code, but it's very useful sample code. It's actually doing a useful task. And then for the DevOps teams, being able to integrate this platform with Git strategies, CI/CD pipelines, which we also publish our own CI/CD pipeline called Argo, and that's open source. We provide API services northbound to them so that they can integrate whatever automations they want to with our platform, and finally, driving this down to infrastructure as code. And so I want to, we're really excited about the Automation Studio application. I'm going to transfer over to Karin in just a moment, but just very quickly, this is the graphical automation canvas that we spoke about. That's the low-code entry to get your networking and other non-programming focused people into the automation game. We have a lot of features here: intelligent templates, built-in networking intelligence, pre-built automations, which we'll talk a little bit more about, open APIs, and then being able to take the automations and publish them in an automation catalog. And so with that, I'm going to give control over to Karin.
Thank you, Rich. Hey, good afternoon, everyone. We're excited to kind of showcase the new application that Itential has rolled out. It's the Automation Studio, right? So based on what Rich actually explained, there are so many silos, right? And our goal is to kind of bring all these disciplines together and help them automate together, because that's what truly results in end-to-end automation. So let me quickly dive into the Automation Studio itself. We're going to be going over some of the components. On the left-hand side of the screen, you'll notice there are automations. So you'll see an automation canvas that we're going to interact with today. So for example, the first thing we're going to take a look at is a custom VPC creation flow, right? So we have, cloud engineers, cloud architects who are responsible for building infrastructure as well as networking in the cloud. So what we have done is allow them to quickly create, without having to write any code, the ability to define what that process looks like and kind of modularize and make it reusable, so somebody else within the organization can leverage that as a component as part of their use case, right? So before I deep dive into some of the tasks on the right-hand side of the screen, what I'm going to do is quickly give you an overview of what each one of these colored boxes mean. The green boxes that you see in front of you are automated tasks, so they're executed by the system. It could be APIs, it could be network intelligent tasks that Itential provides out of box, that removes the complexity away from you having to know which technology is managing which device or entity, right? And the purple boxes that you see in front of you are the automation operators. So let's say you wanted to perform some data manipulation, evaluation within your flow. It will allow you to do so, because what's happening today is because we're taking the API first approach, you're going to hit a lot of APIs across different systems that reside in different domains. So what you want to be able to do is conform to a standard that each one of these technologies require to function. So we're allowing you to execute an API, get that response back, massage it a little bit, move that forward, and apply the results to the next set, right? So this kind of takes away from the whole swivel chair process that's happening today from system to system. On the right-hand side of the screen, you'll notice there's a lot of folders or sections. These are all network intelligent tasks that all of our customers and network engineers or cloud engineers and even software developers can utilize in order to create the automation. For example, this is actually an adapter specifically for AWS EC2. So a cloud engineer can, utilize 200 of its API in order to create something like this. But at the same time, let's say once the VPC is created and you host an EC2 instance within the VPC, those applications hosted in the cloud now need access into your data center for all the data that you're storing there, right? So now you have security teams involved. So if a security team wanted to build their own automation that could contribute towards this, they'll be able to search for tasks, some intelligent tasks that they could drop on the panel, like for PanOS, or let's say you have operation engineers wanting to run command templates, right? So they'll be able to leverage different sets of tools and technologies across the board, across multiple domains to create this automation. And the good thing about, the Automation Studio is you can have multiple different disciplines come here and build something specific to their domain, and then an overlay automation engineer can stitch all those pieces together to actually deliver an end-to-end automation. And one thing I want to point out here is, there's a long list of integrations that are embedded within the platform. Some of these are, out-of-box capabilities that come with Itential Automation Platform, and most of these are integrations that we have actually open source on our dev site that we'll get to later on within the demo, right? So we just want to make sure that if there are systems available within your ecosystem that you want to integrate with and want to leverage within your automation, as Rich mentioned earlier, you can build those adapters yourself. And once the adapters get onboarded within the automation platform, you will actually see a folder similar to this where you can interact with DNA Center or EC2 or, GitLab if you're trying to do NAC. The next thing that we're going to take a look at is forms, right? Another advantage, utilizing the Itential Automation Platform is we're very good at understanding models, right, with respect to Yang and Tosca. So when I go into, let's say, EF5 Create, someone can literally drag and drop and create a metadata form. In addition to that, because we have understanding of what Yang model is and Tosca model is in YAML, you have the ability to now federate all these modeling and the models that are associated within the technologies southbound that are network facing, such as NSO, Ansible, Cloudify. We're able to consume all those models and allow someone to quickly create a form or dynamically generate a form. Where this comes into picture is a lot of times we talk to customers and they say, hey, we have these technologies southbound and I made a change to the service model that actually provisions the service, but now I have to rework all the applications that actually use that model. So in our case, we want to be agnostic, right? So that's why we're taking the model first approach as well, where if you onboard another technology that, applies Tosca or Yang, we'll be able to quickly integrate with that southbound technology and consume all the models that they provide out of box, right? And it's a matter of seconds where you can dynamically generate these forms and allow your customers to leverage those technologies to create or do something within the network, right? So it's as easy as drag and dropping. And on top of that, if you dive into each one of these fields, you have the ability to now influence and add additional constraints on top. So we honor all the constraints that are already provided by the model, but over the top, let's say you wanted to present this particular form to a salesperson, you can start limiting what they can enter versus an engineer, right? So this kind of gives you the flexibility of adopting what the model provides out of box, as well as enhances over the top. The last thing that we're going to go into is the command templates, right? So we work with a lot of NetOps teams. They're very interested in executing prechecks and postchecks on their devices, right? So this is one example. Running BGP commands or show configuration commands. It's very common across doing it on a lot of device types, right? So in this example, what we're saying is the operation engineer, their participation within automation would be to define this precheck template, right? So right now I'm just showing one command, but because we're automating these steps within the maintenance window, instead of running 5 commands within the maintenance window because they're time constrained, now an operation engineer can ask a machine to run 50 commands. And what they would have to do is utilize something like command templates to define exactly what commands they want to run and what rules are associated with each one of these commands. Where this comes into picture and helps them out is, hey, instead of me running a command and checking visually if something is wrong, they can start defining business rules here using contains, regex, etc., and actually execute it. This gets executed live within the maintenance window on each device that's being upgraded, for example, right? So you can drive a lot of rigor as well as robustness before you impact the network, because what we want to do is reduce the network outages, right? So, and in addition to that, we also have something called templates. These are, customers, either DevOps or, NetOps, they have the ability to leverage templating technologies like TextFSM as well as Jinja 2 in order to intelligently parse data in a JSON format versus having to screen scrape text that is coming back from the devices, as well as utilize something like Jinja 2 to dynamically create and generate configuration that could now be validated and tested before being put out on those devices as part of a service or a day zero, day one push. Right, so this is just a quick overview of what Automation Studio provides. It's truly a unified platform to allow a lot of different disciplines to participate, including software developers. Because let's say you have teams writing scripts within your organization. Our automation gateway also allows you to make those scripts and playbooks programmable, so somebody like an automation engineer can take advantage of that, right? So you have participation coming from every different angle that now comes into Automation Studio and makes it an end-to-end automation. So that was my overview of what this brand new application is provided by Itential to kind of unify and democratize network automation. I'm going to hand it back to Rich. Thank you, Rich.
Thank you very much, Karan. Appreciate that. So I hope that gave you just a quick view of how powerful Automation Studio is. At the same time, I hope it helps you to understand how we can really and truly become the on-ramp to your network automation journey. Think in terms of the pre-built automations, and we're going to see one more demo after this, but I want you to think about your DevOps and your NetOps teams. We provide pre-built automations that you can download and integrate into the platform immediately. And if you look at the list, it's a growing list, but these are just a few of them. These are probably some of the top use cases that you can think of the first things my network team really needs to automate: software upgrades, SD-WAN branch management, golden configuration and compliance, DNS updates. These are all very, very useful automations right from the beginning that we can empower your networking team to use. In addition to that, our adapters are the interfaces into not just networking systems, but all kinds of systems. And so again, these are freely available and open source on our developer website. And so these two things together are powerful and immediate benefits to a network operations team that doesn't have a lot of development or programming skills yet has a lot of knowledge, and this helps them immediately. On the DevOps side, these are also immediately useful. On the adapter side, they can see things that are not networking focused that they probably already have integrations into. And the pre-built automations are a very quick way for them to start to see how the platform works, to take these things, these pre-built automations, to extend them, to work with the network teams to see how they can extend them into something even more useful for your organization, and to learn how to operate with their tools inside of our platform. And with that, I'm going to retransition back over to Karan, and he's going to give us a demo of a pre-built automation to see how simple it is to get up and running in the platform.
Thank you, Rich. So what we're looking at here is these are the pre-built automations that Itential has actually pushed out on as part of their open source initiative. So you'll see use cases such as Cisco IS upgrade, and going back to the slide that Rich was sharing, we're going to have a lot more coming up here, right? With respect to some of the top 15 that we would in order to assist and kind of provide an on-ramp to all our customers that are thinking about where do I get started, right? It's always a challenge on where do I get started, how do I get started. So Itential, is taking large steps in order to provide that easy transition into network automation and kind of learn the new way of, a modern way of, using low code in order to automate your network. right? So what you see in front of you are these are some of the automations that we have been internally and have been shared, so customers can leverage that. For example, Cisco iOS upgrade. Whether it's customer A or B, if they have a Cisco device, the upgrade procedure is the same, right? So what we have done is the 70%, which is the actual impact to that device during the upgrade, we have actually automated that and open sourced it. But what that allows you to do is now the customers have the ability to embed some of their technologies within their ecosystem, like a ticketing system or a messaging system, within that automation and go 100%, right? So instead of starting at 0%, we're providing you that 70% head start. In addition to some of these pre-built automations, we also have adapters here. So there's close to 60 plus adapters, and these are integrations that you can leverage in order to connect to your end system and make those as part of your horizontal automation strategy, right? So I can keep scrolling, and we'll definitely take a look at this as part of this demo later on. So what I'm going to do as part of this demonstration is I'm going to download this artifact, which is a Cisco iOS upgrade artifact, and execute it on a virtual device right now, right? So I'm starting from scratch. I don't have any workflows available for the Cisco iOS upgrade, so I'm just going to click on install, click OK. So what it's doing, right, it's actually installing all the required components. In this case, we're going to have those command templates that do pre-checks and post-checks. We're going to have workflows that actually upgrade the device, and we're also going to have something called a service catalog item, which provides a self-service portal capability to your customers who can request it. So the next thing we're going to do is I'm going to quickly dive into the Automation Studio, and you'll notice these are all the workflows that automatically a customer would have in their environment when they install that pre-built automation, right? So this is a main flow, and then you have a specific modular flow to upgrade that device via Ansible, or if this is a connection health check to make sure once the device gets reloaded, this is a modular piece that you can actually run as part of your automation to make sure the device is up and running before you run the post checks, right? So these are all the components that you get out of box immediately. The next thing we're going to do is quickly go into the service catalog folder and associate a form, like a request form. So this is another entry that you actually get. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to associate a form. So this is a way for me to take input from your end user that you're exposing this self-service concept to, right? So let's scroll down. We're going to choose this form. I'm going to go ahead and update. So now if I go back to application and go to service catalog, so before I go into the service catalog, I quickly wanted to point out that when you host a service catalog item using this application, you have the ability to now choose which groups can interact with that or request that service, right? So this becomes very powerful because if you're trying to host a set of services that only apply to your cloud customers, you can now create an automation that only cloud customers can execute, right? So this becomes important, and this is a reusable sense. You can actually execute and request these automations to be kicked off from an external source or from within our service catalog, which I'm going to go next to. So if I go into the service catalog, you'll notice there's an action item here for the device upgrade. So when I click on it, it shows you a form. This form was actually created using the form builder that I was showing you earlier. So we're going to do it on for ATL3, and then we'll choose for the RP boot, right? That's one of the releases that are available on the device. So I'm going to kick this off. So what this has done is a customer has requested iOS upgrade on a device, a network device, and we're going to active jobs, and let's take a look at what's happening within the automation itself, right? So I'm going to quickly go into the visualize screen to kind of show you what the layout of this automation is. So right now it's executing this step within the flow, which is to verify the current state of the device, right? So when I double click on it, you'll notice that, we audit all the information, what the incoming parameters are. So in this case, we're checking to make sure that this release actually exists on the device. And if it doesn't, you have the potential to now kick off another automation that would go and pull that release from an SFTP or an FTP server onto the device programmatically, right? So we want to go to the route of zero-touch automation, and when it comes to software upgrades, so that's why we're providing these little modular flows that you can leverage out of box. So the next thing it's running is executing is the pre-checks on the device, right? So we always want to make sure that we're 100% sure that the device is in the correct state and it has all the interfaces and we capture all the information that we need to before we perform the upgrade. So this is an automated task, and an operation engineer had defined a command template, which actually gets executed here, and you'll be able to see the results. The blue boxes are the manual intervention task, and you'll see a lot of those within this flow. And the reason for that is when most of our customers get started with automation, it's still hard for them to, trust it at first. And that's why they want to make sure that, hey, when someone runs a pre-check or if I make a change into the network, I actually want to see before I approve, right? So that's where it starts, and that's why you see a lot of manual intervention step where someone can actually see the results coming back from the device. But over time, as they perform these automation on thousands of devices, basically the data set that they actually take a look at is the same, right? Almost the same. So what they do is start eliminating the blue boxes, and you'll see the green, which is the automated boxes all the way through, other than when something drastic happens, you have to build in fallouts, right? So majority of the folks just starting out with automation focus on the positive. So you might write a script to do an upgrade, but if the script fails, you have to go check logs, etc. Right? But our automation platform allows you to actually build in. So this pre-built automation comes with a lot of best practices that we have actually learned from working with a lot of different customers, and we have actually embedded that within these flows, right? So you'll realize that if something fails, it'll give you a pre-check error and a decision task, and then allow you to retry those pre-checks in the meantime, right? It's important because you don't want to waste the entire maintenance window because your pre-checks fail, right? Because it's automated, you have the ability to go faster and retry again and again until it's either successful or you want to escalate it because you fail 5 times during the upgrade process, right? So now let's take a look at what the pre-checks results are. So in this case, the operation engineer had defined close to 7 commands to do show version. And this was one of the rules that was set. So I can take a look at the response here. And the reason why it was in pass state is you'll notice it actually matched this config, right? So you can start defining these rule sets and make sure that, hey, I'm going to programmatically check all my responses and based on my rule sets and then move forward to the next step. So I'm going to go ahead and click success, and then we're going to face another manual task that will tell us, hey, what if your pre-check failed? Do you want to ignore it or do you want to repeat the pre-check? So this is a great part, right? Because if someone went in the background and made a out-of-bound change and they fixed it again, you have the ability to repeat the pre-checks and go forward with the flow. In this case, we're going to go ahead and ignore it, and let's move forward to the actual upgrade of the device, right? So I'll go ahead and say upgrade here, and I will switch back to the visualize view. So in the visualize view, what it's actually doing is it's actually getting the boot flash, and what you'll notice is there's an eval step here, right? So as part of best practices, your device could be managed by several different technologies. In this case, that same device is managed by, that device is actually managed by Ansible, but you could have the next device that you're trying to upgrade potentially managed by another, service orchestrator. So based on this evaluation that you built into your flow, it actually took this route, and we have a sub workflow. So if I double click on it, you notice this is a modular flow that we had created to perform an upgrade using Ansible, right? So these are all the tasks that we have embedded within the flow. It'll perform a backup of the running config, it'll wipe the boot statements, and it will set the boot statement and ultimately reload, right? So what it's doing now is it has successfully reloaded the device. So if I, double click on it, you will take a look at what the incoming parameters are and what the outgoing, right? So it's successfully reloaded, and now we're waiting for the virtual router to actually come back. So we have a secondary flow here that performs a test connection action, which it will ping a device, right? It will ping a device, and once the device is up and running, it will make sure the ping results are successful 5 times before we move forward and say, yes, the device is completely up. Because sometimes you might get false signal and say, yes, the device is up, and it goes back down again. So we actually had built in some robustness flow where it will keep retrying a configurable amount of time. So right now I've set it to 5 times, but you could set it to 20 or 30, right? So this is the beauty about the platform is you can define your own parameters. It's model and data driven, so that will suit the needs of your organization and the way that you actually upgrade devices within your environment, right? So this process, because it's an actual device, takes close to 2 to 3 minutes. But while it's doing this in the background, what I would like to show is our dev site. I would encourage everyone to go to our dev site and take a look at the open source repositories. And as Rich mentioned earlier, right, our goal is to provide as many use cases out there that will give you the on-ramp and the confidence to get started with automation day one, right? We don't want you to be scared to start from, ground zero and say, how do I get started? This seems hard, etc. So we're putting a lot of effort into providing the pre-built automation, which are use cases. So you'll notice there's a lot more here. So when they get certified and published, you'll be able to utilize an application within our platform to easily install it, just like I did for the Cisco iOS upgrade, right? So you'll see a lot more in the coming months. So in addition to the pre-built automations, if I go back to the open source page again, you'll notice there's adapters, right? Adapters are the way that we actually integrate with all the technologies within your ecosystem, right? So these are categorized by SD-WAN, security, etc. And we have another page on our dev site that will actually give you a list. In addition to providing close to 65 open source adapters, we have also open sourced the actual builder, which we mentioned earlier. So if you don't see a technology on this list, you will be able to build it yourself, given that it has open API spec. You basically drop that in the panel and walk through a few steps, and within 5 minutes you'll have that integration ready to go. And this is very powerful because a lot of times customers are investing in new technologies. They already have old technologies, but they're swivel chairing between because there is no way to bridge the two. So Itential provides an easy way for you to start bridging all of these technologies together in order to provide that end-to-end automation goal that everyone is looking for, right? That's where the real ROI is. The last thing that I'm going to cover with respect to open source is this also helps out the DevOps, the group, right? So the CI/CD pipelines and technology that we use internally, which is Argo, we have open sourced that as well. So all the applications that go through the rigorous amount of unit testing and linting and all the great stuff that's embedded in here, you will be able to leverage. So your DevOps team will be able to leverage this outside of using the Itential automation platform to make sure that the applications that you're rolling out are thoroughly tested, as well as meet your criteria of quality, right? So I just quickly wanted to highlight a few pieces, but definitely would encourage folks to go through our dev site as well as the open source page. So let's go back to the flow and see where we are. So currently what it's doing is it's actually testing connection. It will perform this particular loop 5 times. And once it's complete, it will move to the next step. So it looks like, the ping test passed. This is prime. So now we're going to go back to the main flow and see that it's actually running the post checks. Another thing you'll notice is when the automation gets executed, if it never took this particular path, you'll see the boxes that are grayed out. So at least it will give you a visual way of assessing, did it take a success or a failure path. So I'm going to quickly go back to our main job. It's currently running post checks on the device to see if all the interfaces were up or if the version was changed successfully, etc. And we'll be able to take a look at the results shortly after the post checks are completed. And there you go. So I'm going to take a look at the results here. So you'll notice, nothing was affected. And usually when engineers perform upgrade, they have a pre, they have a post, they're going to do a diff compare to make sure that everything is okay. But in this case, you can programmatically set these rules so you don't have to, right? So the whole goal is to kind of take the mundane tasks away and allow you to kind of focus on the robustness of the entire process versus, hey, I ran this command and I want to take a look at the results of it separately. So I'm going to quickly scroll through this. Because this was existing prior, it's not, as an engineer for me, okay, well, NTP is disabled. It was not a big deal because it was disabled prior to the upgrade. So I'm going to move forward and say success. And shortly we'll take a look at what the actual diff looks like on the device. I'll say ignore because I'm okay with the Prechecks. And this is the diff, right? So this actually tells you what actually happened. So I'm going to quickly take minimal. And you'll notice that previously the device was on this particular boot flash, and now we set it to this one, right? So this is a quick way of someone to verify. But again, you know, as they start becoming more advanced into their automation stages, they would programmatically check for these differences and approve or roll back the actual upgrade. So I'm going to go ahead and proceed on this step. And my upgrade is complete. So that was a short little demonstration of how teams within organization can quickly ramp up on their automation journey. And Itential is very dedicated to kind of provide these on-ramps day in, day out. So please look out for all the things that are coming out in our open source. With that, I'm going to hand it off to Rich again. Thank you, everybody.
Karan, thank you very much. That was an excellent presentation. So continuing on, I hope that as the audience, you can see just how valuable and how powerful the application, the platform that we provide is. We want to be the automation factory that you use with Itential. We want to leverage the existing automation efforts that you may have already, both inside the network and out. We believe that expanding automation participation to all the groups within networking, software developers, IT operations, and specifically for the skill set that is not that doesn't have programming or developing in their skill set, to get them engaged through a low code drag and drop environment like you just saw. So the Automation Studio building new workflows and automations, and then the immediate ability to import what we call an artifact or a use case like a software upgrade, and to go through that and bring immediate value. And then eventually we believe the skill sets will work across the board, but the platform will be the place where we really engage all people. Scale automation as you grow. You saw a very specific and simple use case today, router iOS upgrade. Imagine that is your first step, because it's easy, it's common, it's useful. But then from that you build, and then you can start to see through our integrations, our adapters, how you can start to build this beyond just a simple automation task into something much bigger. And again, we want to integrate with your existing environment. You have the tools, so the people that are coming to the table have their own set of skills. They're the right people to help out with the automation process, and they come with the tools and the systems that they're used to. Instead of saying, throw that away, we can't use it, you have to adopt what we're doing, we're saying, no, bring all of that in. They're API driven, we're API first, and let's use the tools and the systems that you already have and start building an automation across the board using our platform. And with that, I think we have just a couple of minutes to take some Q&A. Karan, you out there? Let me see if I can pull one out. Okay. Here's one. Can I segment who across my team can edit or execute automations? And I'll answer that one, Karan. And the answer is a resounding yes. Built into the platform, we do integration with Active Directory, LDAP, and so we know the groups that you have defined, and we respect those, and they're available at a very granular level inside the platform. And in fact, I think, Karan, you actually had maybe one of the templates that you brought up that had the groups list that was discovered. Is that correct?
That is absolutely correct.
Yeah, so that is built into the platform. Security is definitely important, and we want to make sure that not only with the ability to easily create workflows, we can control who, when, and where those workflows are executed. Let's see. Is it easy? Here's a second question. Is it easy to customize pre-built automations? Once I download it, am I all set? I mean, this is a great question. This is why we wanted Karan to show the installation of a use case, the basic configuration, and actually running it. And it is really that easy. I mean, there's this common disbelief that, man, this must be really difficult, because outside of a platform like this, it is. Karan, can you validate that what you did was really that simple?
Yes, absolutely. So our goal is to kind of provide that, time to value as soon as you get started, right? So once you download the pre-built automation, you have 70% of what you wanted to do with your network device, right? Which is to actually upgrade it. And because some of these procedures are standardized, now you have the ability to either leverage just the upgrade piece by itself, but most of the times people find the most ROI is to kind of integrate with some of their other technologies within the ecosystem to drive that 100% of the process, right? So integrating with your ServiceNow, integrating with your Jiras and notification system to kind of make sure all groups are involved as well as alerted when something goes right and wrong within the network, right? So it's very easy for you to start leveraging that's out of box, but it's also, a lot of, organizations have different ways of alerting within their span. So they can absolutely build on top. And that's the goal, is this is a ramp up, and then you can get as complicated and advanced as you want.
Absolutely. Immediate value through common tasks that network engineers do on a day-to-day basis. And then from that, the ability to kind of build up and create, more end-to-end automation. That's what we're all about. All right, I think we have time for one more question. And this is also a good one. How do pre-built automations adapt to environment changes? Do I have to redo work as I'm modernizing my ecosystem? Karan, I'm going to throw that one to you.
Absolutely. So, from a rework perspective, that the way that we have built and architected our platform is we want to be agnostic to the technologies that you onboard. So, from a pre-built perspective, the reason why you saw a lot of flows that are modular is now you have an easy way to introduce the new technologies without affecting your mass, the 100% of the automation, right? Because your ServiceNow is not going to go away. Your Jira is not going to go away. What might change is potentially the device being managed by another DevOps tool or a controller, right? That's why we have embedded something like a broker that kind of takes the complexity away and keeps the automation the way it is today, right? So our goal is to allow you to build future-proof solutions and future-proof automations, and that's what we're going to strive going forward and do currently. So yes, absolutely. It's a minimal amount of impact, but historically, if you change something southbound, there's rework all over the place. So that was
All right.
that was
Well,
my
thank you very much, Karan. That was great. And I want to thank all of our participants for your engagement today. Hopefully found this webinar to be insightful and valuable. For further questions or to learn more, please contact us at the email listed here or visit our website. And again, thank you very much, Karan, and thank you to the audience once again, and have a great day.